Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. It was a just 2 different days of football for me. Saturday, classic game, great win. And then on Sunday, the Steelers just get pounded by the Bengals. And Mike Tomlin comes out, says that he's going to make changes. He's promising to make changes. I don't know what he's going to be able to do at this point. I was hoping I was wrong. I've been saying it since last year. At Ben's age, at the end of the year, it doesn't matter. He talked about how he was feeling great. They added an extra regular season game. I knew that once the season wore on him, the team was going to start to fall apart. It's happened for 4 or 5 years now? The end of season goes down through, and it just gets worse and worse until they're finally put out of their misery by who knows who. Whether it's in the playoffs, whether it's just another team or whatever. That's just how the season has been going, and nothing's changing. So, I mean, you're starting to hear the whispers again, like, what should the Steelers do? Should they get rid of Mike Tomlin? And I know we had messaged about it over the weekend, but what are your thoughts on that?
Typically, I'm not one to force change, but I feel like with the way that the seasons have imploded the last couple of years, I want to know what changes he's planning on making and like how he's planning on doing it, because I don't think at this stage of the game that he's making changes. And I almost think you're better off with you have the end of the year where likely you're not bringing Ben back. I think for a franchise like Pittsburgh that's willing to stick with a coach for an extended period of time, I almost think you're better off getting a fresh face to allow that new coach to go through this rebuild transition. Because you have guys like Claypool that are going out saying practice isn't fun and we need to have music. And like I feel like they're losing. He's losing players. Like they're not playing for him the way that some of those older Steelers did when he first took over for Cowher.
Well, I'll say this, that if they wanted to make that change, it should have happened when he lost the locker room with the Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell stuff. I mean, it was pretty clear that there were locker room issues. He had lost them, and they never got him back. But they kept him around. I wonder, some of it is with like the veteran players, and you could do a complete clean house. Like, let's be honest, he hasn't had a losing record. And if you want to go full rebuild, at this point, I'm saying you're stuck with him so far. Just stick with him some more. I mean, like, what if the Eagles had stuck with Andy Reid? And I know that they have a Super Bowl win. Andy Reid also has one, so like that would have been zero net change. But in that scenario, what if they would have had Patrick Mahomes? Or like someone else going forward rather than where they are now? I mean, I know Mahomes has kind of been figured out.
But you know what? And that's a perfect example of a team that the Eagles had Donovan McNabb, and they went through that period where they had a window to win, and it was like that window closed. And rather than just continuing to just beat the dead horse, they moved on. And with the new coach, they were able to transition into a period of winning. And I think you could that could be another scenario where that works for Pittsburgh, where you have someone that the players are willing to give a chance to.
Well, hold on, because Aaron Rodgers had said back in like October or whatever when we first started talking about him that he really liked Mike Tomlin. So if you're going to play that scenario where you want to make a pitch to him to see can he come in and save Pittsburgh, that's where I'm saying you don't know if it's going to be a total rebuild yet. Sure, you get rid of Ben, but what's going to happen in this offseason? Like, can you bring in another veteran quarterback to see if that kind of recharges you? I mean, look what Stafford has done with the Rams. They kind of had like stagnant issues after their Super Bowl loss with Goff. they make the change. I know that they're not. I don't think lately they've been having as much success, right? They dropped a couple in a row, but maybe it's just an age thing with him too. Who knows? Some of these older quarterbacks, you start the season hot, you start to get tired, they figure you out. You go through a little bit of a losing streak. Who knows? But you can still re-energize it with someone. On the other hand, look at what Aaron Rodgers is doing, putting it together for Green Bay. They seem to be the favorite now in the NFC. Why not? If you can make that move, because there's no guarantee you're not rebuilding like Philadelphia or Washington or the Giants, where it seems like they can't find a quarterback.
But I almost think if you're looking at some of these changes, like they had several players on the defense who were contributing guys that are not playing right now. So I almost wonder, like, if you can get these guys who aren't playing back, and I don't know with some of the some of the rationale of like where they are, but it's like if you get like some of these guys on the defensive line back, and maybe you give it another chance, because I know that they've had on and off injuries in the past with guys on the back end in the secondary, and they're just getting scorched by everyone. But some of those weaknesses can be erased if you're getting pressure on the quarterback. So I know, like, especially at the professional level, one or two injuries can really change the dynamic of that team. But I feel like every year we're going rounds on, well, if we stay healthy, I mean, how much slack do you give?
And that's something where it's not just the Steelers, but some of the key things, like you beat the Lions, you're still in that seventh playoff spot right now. I don't know how the tiebreakers would go head-to-head or whatever, but that's actually keeping you a game back, and it's like, all right, or a half game back, whatever it is, in that for that final spot. But everyone's facing injuries. Look at Christian McCaffrey. Again, done. Like, what a complete waste of money by the Panthers. I don't see how they don't cut him. Like, I don't know what the penalty will be for that, but it has to be better than just paying a guy to do I look good commercials, right? I text you guys, I'm not even joking. Like, it's almost like a hatred now for the guy. Because, like, if you're a fan and you're wondering, like, how's he getting all these ticky-tack injuries? Like, oh, his quad's hurting him. We're paying him all this money. We don't want it to get injured further, so we're going to put him on rest. And then, oh, his ankle got rolled. I don't think there's really any damage, but because the season's lost, we're going to just sit him out. That's exactly what happened last year. At some point, you got to pay the guy. You're paying him to play, not to rest. He played 10 games since that contract. Like, Matt Rule has to be like, hey, I'm going to go to Carolina. I'm going to do all these awesome things with McCaffrey. And then he's like, never mind. Now I'm here. Cam Newton, I said he started out hot. Took 1 week for him to get figured out. Like, that's exactly what would happen to Kaepernick if he came back. There's a reason why these guys are not getting picked up by any teams. Like, he's done. The Panthers are left with PJ Walker. And it's like, all right, like, they're completely done. And Matt Rule, they're like talking about, oh, is he going to go to college? Is he going to go to college, back to college? It's like, maybe he'll just stay there, or maybe he'll just go to a different franchise if he wants to leave. I know the NFL has stricter rules to get around bouncing around or whatever, but you got to get the guy some help. Like, the roster's decimated. That's not really where the Steelers are. I mean, the Steelers aren't on a third-string quarterback. I guess he would have been the backup because they signed Darnold, and then they let Bridgewater go. He's been playing all right with the Broncos. So,
yeah.
I mean, that's where the Steelers are heading. It's a quarterback-driven league. It hasn't changed. Unless you can find a guy like Tannehill that's able to just rely on their rushing game and kind of build around that. But the Steelers aren't there. They can't even run the ball. Like, you have nothing to fall back on. It's not like when they made that transition from Tommy Maddox to Ben Roethlisberger or whatever was in between back then. Like, they had an offensive system that worked. Ben came in, they were like, just don't mess it up, dude. Don't mess it up. We have all these weapons. Now they just have locker room issues. So maybe you're right. Clean house. I don't know. At this point, I don't want to talk about them anymore this week. We got to see how they bounce back. I want to see the changes, but we have too much college stuff to talk about because it's a crazy week. Must be the craziest weekend of college football I can remember in the last 10 years, right? With all the coaching changes that are major.
I saw the best comment from Twitter was somebody had noted that it's because Michigan finally beat Ohio State that now the college football apocalypse has started.
Well, we're going to get into that. Do you have anything else on the NFL?
No.
All right, I did have one more thing. The Packers have put their stock back up for sale. And so, I've been following this because I know a guy that has Packers stock. And I've looked into it because I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And I wonder if that would ever, come back up. This was back in, 2010 or whatever. And they only make it for sale, every 10 years or whenever they're doing, stadium renovations. But every time it happens, you get all the NFL hit pieces on it about it being a scam. But it's not really a scam if you know what you're doing. You're donating money to help the Packers, and then you become a voting member of their ownership board, where if you do it one time, I think it's $300, you own one out of 300,000 or something votes. Maybe there's 5 million stocks. I don't know how many there are, but there's 300,000.
5 million.
So you're going to be an owner. It's not going to really matter. But I was digging into it because I thought that would be a cool thing to do. Give me an NFC team to root for, because I grew up liking the Niners. I'm not a fan of their ownership, so I really don't care. And what if you are the ownership, Matt? They don't have one. They don't have an ownership, so you really can't be mad. You can be mad at the GM. Guess what? They always change. Or the president. It's a board. You vote for the board. They get a new board. You get to go to the meeting, or you just watch it online and then put in your vote. It's just like owning any other stock, except you can't sell it and stuff. But I think those are more NFL restrictions, because obviously they don't want some billionaire swooping in and joining their club. Because it's like a country club. They have to vet the owners, remember? Just like the NBA, they have to kind of do a background check and say, we think this guy will be a good fit with our club. So I think a lot of the restrictions on the stock side are more from the NFL. But I did find it interesting that per the NFL terms, when I was doing my research, Matt, you can call yourself an NFL owner. You can market that if you wanted to, be yeah, I own the Packers. And they can fine you up to $500,000 if you're the owner. So for all the people that's saying it's a scam, it's not a scam if the NFL comes out and says yeah, we could do that. We've never had to do it. So there's been 0 times that it's happened. But if you wanted to market yourself as the owner, they can't legally stop you. But they could fine you if you're talking trash on Goodell. He could be yo, come on. What are you doing? Or could you imagine if
you're talking trash and you get this fine, you're I can't pay this.
You're on a stream with Aaron Rodgers being hey, yeah, I'm here with Packers owner. And then with Aaron Rodgers here, and we're going to talk about how he didn't really lie about the COVID vaccines. I guarantee that fine that they gave up or whatever would have been covered. Now, I also wonder, though, because a lot of the funds that get paid in by the stocks or whatever and the revenues they make, it's basically an endowment like universities have. So they have a fund that's called the Packers Fund or something. That's where all their money goes. So there's really no oversight. But if you're buying in now and you're only buying one stock, which I think that they're trying to limit powers. I think they said you could only buy 200 of them. Although overall you could own 200,000 maybe. So a single person can only own a very small percentage of the club. But it would be a cool thing to do. So I'm just bringing that up there because they were talking about it during the game. And then I saw all these people calling it a scam. No, a scam would be a seat license Do you know about seat licenses?
No.
As I stumble through it. So a lot of colleges and professional teams, this is the biggest scam in sports. They make you buy a seat license, Matt, where every year you pay hundreds of dollars to get the chance to buy season tickets for that seat. So you don't really own it. You're renting a seat where every year it might be a $300 donation. Like, let me just randomly pick. What's the team that we hate? Ohio State? Let's look that up. Because you go ahead and you look it up, and they change it. And of course, I picked Ohio State because they're a bigger one. So here you go. They have 3 levels of personal seat license and features, Matt. Here are the benefits. Oh, this is for basketball, so it's not just football. Here's the benefit of that, Matt. You buy the seat license. Guess what? You can purchase tickets to that same seat for 20 years. 20 years. What a great deal. You keep buying the license every year. And then, oh man, here's another benefit, Matt. Wide, comfortable cushion seats with an asterisk. Only if you're in the endowment club. So, what are you doing? Here you go. Oh, here's another benefit, Matt. The right to purchase a priority parking pass. Not just you get one. You're buying a license. You're getting nothing here. That's what everyone's argument against the Packers stock is. They're like, well, you're not really getting. You get to go to those meetings or whatever, but you only have as many votes as your stock is. And I'm like, yeah. What do you expect? There's thousands of other people that are buying it. Here you go with like the seat license. Like if you want more control, spend the $60,000 and get all 200 or whatever the limit is. And then next time they come up, buy the limit again until you reach the top limit. Then guess what? Who knows? Maybe you'll be on the board then, but you're going to be throwing a ton of money in to own a professional sports team. But I'm still saying the personal seat license is, the complete ripoff. Oh, so Matt, here's how it is. Guess how much a seat license for Ohio State basketball is for the club, like the actual endowment club.
Okay.
Take a guess.
Oh, it's going to be a lot, but I don't know. A couple thousand?
It's the first time to buy into it for the top level is $20,000. Then you have to annually contribute $2,000 per seat that you buy. So if you have 4 seats because you have a wife and 2 kids, that's $8,000 a year you have to annually buy, or you have to annually donate. No, the tickets aren't included, mind you. This is just so you have a right to purchase a parking pass or a season ticket.
But there has to be some other benefit to that.
Cushion seats, Matt. Cushion seats right from their website. I'm reading it right to you. Access to the Huntington Club, a hospitality complex located in the Schottenstein Center. I don't know their guy's name.
Or it better be where there's somebody feeding it to you.
That's all, Matt. There's 7 bullets here. Or 6 bullets. I think I've read them all. The right to purchase tickets for 20 years. The right to purchase tickets for additional events like concerts and family shows for 20 years. Exclusive to the club. The lower level is $10,000 to buy in. And then it's $500 donation per seat per year. And every 5 years, there's a maintenance fee that the higher level didn't have. So who knows what the hell that is? Every 5 years, you get another couple $1,000 check in the mail, or wouldn't be a check. It would be a bill. They're like, yo, you got to pay your maintenance fee. It's coming due. But guess what? You get to focus in on Ohio State basketball, Matt. So for people that are talking about the stock saying like, well, you get your name on their board, you get your name like listed with their owners, you get the actual owner certificate, and it's only $300. Like $300 compared to $10,000 for just the chance to buy tickets for 20 years. This Packers thing's a lifetime thing. People have had them since like the 1920s. So I just wanted to bring that in. Maybe I'll do it for the show. We'll see. Anything else you have on that? You have any thoughts on it? Actually, I don't even think I got your thoughts, dude.
I think it's interesting. If you have, number one, if you have the extra income, it would be something cool to own stock in the Packers.
Get a bunch of buddies together and then have an owners meeting. You're just hanging. And then you count your votes and you're less than like, not even of a percentage of voting unless you would all max out. But like no one's spending 60 grand. I mean, actually, to be honest, as much money as they raised as fast as they did, I guarantee some people maxed out and spent the 60 grand or close to it this go around because they're probably doing that. Although they're probably at every game and that's their entertainment, you know? Because for an entertainment thing, that can't be bad. And even as I was doing like coaching research for the show, trying to make sure I had the updated list, I get an ad, no joke, for a Wonder Woman statue. Just a random Wonder Woman statue. Guess how much that cost you?
What?
$560. You can almost buy 2 shares of Packers stock for that. What the hell? And you're an owner. You get to vote every year if you really want to. And you get to go. You hang out. They have a tailgate. Owners only. It's like with those clubs at the airlines. The Admirals Club or whatever the hell they're called. You like get the extra booth and you get the early boarding. That's kind of what it would be. But people are like, hey, you don't get tickets with this. I'm like, you don't get tickets with preferred seat licenses that are in every sport. So in terms of scams, seat licenses are the biggest scam. And included, I have to make sure I get my digs in at the NFL before I become an owner, Matt. You have to do where you buy preseason tickets as part of a season ticket holder. Maybe that's not every team. Who knows? When I'm on the owner's board, maybe I'll vote against that. But that's all I have. Anything else for the NFL?
No.
All right, big money. You're talking about it. Michigan beat Ohio State. I honestly, going into the game, I didn't have high hopes. You hear the same thing, and it's funny. It's very funny to me because everything has kind of reversed. It's like a bizarro world where like kind of like that Seinfeld episode where he does the opposite. That's kind of what it feels like now. Because I hear Ohio State fans talking about how it's a down year for them. I'm like, oh, that's funny. I didn't hear that a week ago. Why would it have been a down week or a down year? Last week I was hearing about how they had the number 1 offense and how they were going to go up against Georgia's number 1 defense in the national championship, and it was going to be an epic battle. Now it's like, oh, well, I said it on the show. I don't know when I brought it up. Maybe it was last year. But I said, if a team takes Iowa's bend but don't break offense, or defense, I mean, you take that bend but don't break defense and you put it together with like a team that recruits really well in comparison to Iowa, how dangerous would that team be? And I think you saw it on Saturday. Like, Ohio State couldn't move the ball. It took forever. Michigan ran it down their throats. They had almost, 300 yards rushing?
Yeah.
Ohio State had the time of possession for 4 more minutes because they were dinking and dunking down the field. It was like a high school version of Mike Leach's offense is what I felt like I was watching. They didn't run the ball. They were just doing something. I was talking to a friend, and they were saying that a lot of NFL linemen have been speaking out against like how tough it is to block when you're in pass protection for like the RPOs all the time. Like you're constantly just backing up. You always have to take a step back. You never get to actually hit anyone. And like, I don't think Ohio State, at least from what I remember, they weren't blocking downhill very much at all. And in that fourth quarter, when they had to pass, their linemen were just getting pancaked. I mean, Hutchinson, I think, should be at the Heisman ceremony. Did I say that on the show last week? I said my statement was if he made an impact in the game, he should have been in New York because he's the most important player on Michigan's team, and he was up against their 5-star tackle that a lot of people had in the first round of the NFL draft, and he punked them. Like, you wouldn't even have known that guy he was blowing over at the end of the game was a 5-star tackle. And that's no slight on him. I just think if you're voting for the Heisman, you're voting for the best player. I don't understand how one guy can grade out every week as the number one defender across the country, and yet people aren't even talking about him. I think I did hear the announcers at the game said, like, he should be in the Heisman, and I think someone mentioned it later, like in a different random game, where they said, well, if you're talking about Heisman, you should invite at least a defensive player if they're that dominant. I haven't seen a guy that dominant since Sue. And I know Sue was more of like a defensive tackle. He ate space, so he had a lot more tackles. Hutchinson had 3 sacks in that game. He was a half inch from tipping Ohio State's last touchdown, like just batting it down, and then the game would have been even more out of control. Like, Ohio State did a lot of things that, I mean, it just took luck. Like, they had the behind-the-back catch, which should have probably been pass interference, if I'm being fair. But I heard before the game that the Big Ten was putting those Ohio State refs back into the crew. Remember the ones from 2016 that had the controversy? I don't think all of them were on the crew, but the guy from Ohio was confirmed by the Detroit newspaper before the game as being part of the crew, and the Big Ten released a statement that said, we consider him part of our best crew. We wanted to send our best crew out there. So I thought, oh shit, here we go again. Like, turn on the DMX song. Here we go. Ohio State's going to just start to get some phantom calls and they're going to blow it out. But I honestly think the Big Ten was like, hey, they're going to be watching you. Don't call anything. Because they really didn't call anything. Ohio State jumped off sides a bunch of times. And they blamed it on, I think the quarterback said he was sick. Even though before the game he said that was a rumor, he wasn't sick. Then he said, oh, he was sick, but it wasn't a stomach flu, Matt. It made his voice not be loud enough.
Don't worry, it was just COVID. He just couldn't smell.
So he couldn't call over the loud stadium, which, you know, you also hear about how quiet it is there. And then it's like, well, that was really loud there, though. We had a bunch of offsides penalties. But you didn't watch a game, did you?
Negative. That was opening day of hunting season.
I'll say this. The one thing that stood out to me is Ryan Day, his coaching. It's a clear step down from Urban Meyer. And I'll go on record saying that. And the evidence for me that really stood out, how many times is your kick returner going to fumble or mess up the kickoff and you don't bench him? Like, what the hell are you doing if you're coaching where the opening kickoff, Matt, they have 2 guys, Michigan kicks it down to like the 3-yard line. They let it bounce, and then they're like struggling to pick it up, and they're down there. Then they had a punt where they had their own guy fair catching the ball at the 3-yard line. Luckily, Michigan's guy was so surprised because no one ever fair catches at the 3-yard line. Like, are you kidding me? Why would you even do that to yourself? So he was trying to actually catch the ball. He ran into the Ohio State guy, and then he was shocked that it wasn't another Michigan player. He's like, oh shit, that was you? What are you doing down here? Like, because, you know, as a kick team, like when you're doing a short punt, your goal is to run down, run to the goal line, try to locate the ball and catch it so that it's downed. And no one ever catches the ball out. If you're told as a punt returner to stand on the 10-yard line, if it goes over your head, let it go. Nope. He's running back, catching the ball. They really got bailed out with the kick catch interference there. And then there was another kickoff, the same exact scenario where if you're the coach, you tell the guy, like, hey, it seems like they keep kicking it on the 3-yard line. They must have scouted us or something here. Catch the ball. Just fair catch it. Like, what are you doing trying to run with it? You're fumbling it. You're not being cleared. Like, they had like 2 or 3 kickoffs where it was like that. And I'm like, Urban Meyer would have never played that guy again. Like, that would have never happened. Urban also wouldn't have let his running back that's supposed to be like leading one of the Heisman categories for running backs, or like the running back awards or whatever. He would never have let him not run the ball, you know? Like, at some point, you got to get your defense a rest. They're getting run over.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess they did get the rest in the fourth quarter when you're down in the game, Matt. You think you'd take a few shots downfield? No. Let's just dink and dunk it. And Michigan would just let them do it. And there were a couple penalties and, like, things that really kept Ohio State going. And then, like I said, a couple catches where my only beef is, like, Fox, what are you doing? How do you not have an angle on the field? Like, there were 3 reviews, I think, on the very long Ohio State touchdown drive, or maybe there were 2 reviews, where they didn't have a view of it. The pass interference that, like, Michigan's guy, like, tackled the guy, and he ended up catching the ball behind him. Like, you know how one of those plays he reaches around, catches it because it was a bad throw? So It wasn't really, the quarterback, basically, the quarterback had a bad throw. The defender hit him, not thinking the ball was going to go there. And so the receiver reached around him, caught the ball. I thought he didn't have it. Like, he had it pinned against the defender. I thought it was on the ground. Fox didn't have an angle. They're like, yeah, we don't actually have an angle where you see the ball. I'm like, you don't have the opposite sideline? Like, what the hell are you doing here? You're shooting the game in 4K. And then there was another one where it was across the middle. I think it was like a 3rd or 4th down. Their guy made like a diving catch. I thought it should have been reviewed because it looked like it hit the ground again. Didn't have an angle on it, wide open in the middle of the field. And then they said that the in-stadium camera from the Michigan beat writers, they said that it didn't hit the ground and that the stadium camera had a view of it. Why didn't Fox? Don't they have the same cameras? I was so confused on where they're like, yeah, we don't have that one. And then the same with there was a touchdown too, where he was running to the left. I think it was the same. I think these were all on the same drive, to be honest, because it took forever. It was like they had one long drive where they were like, you think Ohio State, you're thinking they have the number 1 offense. They're going to score fast. They're going to score fast. Like, no. It took basically the entire game for them just to cut the lead. And then Michigan just ran right down the field and scored again. And at that point, Ohio State was kind of letting them. And I'm like, you just took a 12-minute touchdown drive and you're letting them score? Like, what are you doing? But I thought he went down the sideline. They said they didn't have a view of the ball, which would have been, like I said, I've been saying this for years, you need to have a camera that faces the goal line. Straight down. The NFL's been doing it. I mean, Fox does NFL games. Why do you not have that for the college game? Those are the things that stood out to me. The TV viewership was supposed to be awesome. It was like 14 million or something like that. Highest rated game of the year. But crazy. I see a lot of people, Ohio State fans, posting like, oh, Michigan hasn't won in like 10 years or whatever. This is a fluke. I don't think a double-digit win is a fluke, you know? But we'll see.
Well, no, but I also think, like, when you go back to our show last week, I said the key to the game was Embiid. Or are you going to have that consistent quarterback play? And I think when you're running the ball as efficiently as what Michigan was able to do, it takes pressure off the defense, it chews clock, and I think that it plays to their strength. When you don't have that quarterback consistently making plays, it hurts you in a lot of ways because then you're getting yourself into a lot of those 3rd and long situations, and too many of those will break your back. So I think like when you have yourselves in those easier situations, the formula for winning football games hasn't changed in 60 years. You run the ball, you play defense, and you're fine. And I think what's hurt Michigan in the past is that Ohio State was able to take advantage of a lot of those plays. They were scoring so early that then they weren't able to play that slow smash mouth style that they like. And once they started getting that lead, it started to kind of work in reverse for Ohio State, where as opposed to playing quick and been playing with a lead, they had to try to come from behind, and Michigan was playing that bend but don't break defense. Now you also see some of those penalties, like the false starts and other stuff that Ohio State had that was setting them back, and that throws off your rhythm offensively when your scheme is based off of being ahead of the chains, and now you're having a false start to put you back, and you're having the quarterback couldn't hear. I mean, home field advantage. You knew going in that it was going to be a crazy atmosphere, and they had to take advantage of that.
I think this, because Michigan didn't have a big lead, I don't think it really would have changed much from Ohio State's perspective this year, because I think Michigan's always kind of played them tough. In the second quarter, the main thing in past years is the third quarter adjustments from Urban Meyer were just unreal. And in the third quarter, they would come out and just pull away. I mean, Ohio State had the lead in the second quarter. I think the halftime lead, did Michigan have it? It was a 1-point lead, whoever was up. And I think Ohio State got the ball. So, like, Ohio State had the chance where it's like I said, again, here we go again. Same exact thing. Ohio State's going to pull away in the third. But you didn't see the coaching adjustments. And then to add on to, like, your running the ball stuff, Michigan was taking deep throws that were hitting. Ohio State really didn't do that. They had the one touchdown that was kind of like a longer throw from like the 30 or whatever that the guy made a great catch on. Again, they had a lot of great receptions. And that's where, like, I'm looking at it where they have 3 receivers right now, the best receiving core in the country. Why are you not throwing deep to them? Like, Michigan should not have more deep targets than you, right? I mean, you're mixing in. Michigan's running flea flickers to try to get some separation. They rotated in the second quarterback. And that's the one thing where you talk about the quarterback play. Michigan's freshman quarterback has a higher ceiling than Cade McNamara, J.J. McCarthy. But in going forward, I would assume Ohio State's going to lose some of those NFL guys because are you going to stay again? How are you going to get more touches if all 3 of them stay than what they've gotten this year? I would assume a couple of them are going to go. And then I don't know the ages. I did see how young Ohio State was, but if you look at their defensive line, I think 3 of the 4 were all junior, senior guys. Like, they had upperclassmen on that team. Like, that team was not, I know they say they're one of the youngest in the country, but that's more just on, like, the offensive side of the ball. I think one of the big keys, they did lose Greg Madison, the the co-defensive coordinator from Michigan that they hired. He was Harbaugh's old defensive line coach. He had retired last year, and Urban's not there anymore. Urban was in the facility until this year. And the team definitely looks lost. Did you see the halftime video where they were like yelling in the tunnel? Because Michigan has a tunnel where they come out.
I thought that was pregame.
No, that was halftime. Michigan's guys were like all pumped up to come out, and Ohio State's guys were just walking out of that tunnel looking like they didn't want to be there. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, Michigan has a chance. And then when I saw them not even blocking and just getting run over, it's like, I don't think they want to play anymore. Like, they're just getting hit in the mouth. And sometimes you have that happen where a team just craters. And I've seen a lot of Ohio State guys say, like, oh, look at all the bulletin board material you're giving the guys by saying how soft they were and stuff like that. Because players are said, like, yeah, we were surprised how soft they were. They're more of a finesse team, I think Gaddis called them. But it's true. Oregon kicked them in the teeth. Michigan State, that's the one thing where, like, to your point, I think Ohio State was hoping to jump out early and just coast like they did against Michigan State. And when they got kicked in the mouth, they didn't know what to do. And pretty much ended their season. I think that's kind of what happened in their other high-profile games, and typically in like the playoffs or whatever, where they play in Alabama and they lose big because they don't know what to do. Like, they don't hit that adversity in the Big Ten with their schedule. They just don't. I mean, their schedule, with their crossover being Nebraska the past couple of years, their schedule is much easier than what Penn State and what Michigan have been dealing with. Like, that's just a fact. Penn State had to go to Iowa and Wisconsin. Michigan had to go to Wisconsin this year. It's like Ohio State hasn't had to do that. And that's why I hate the Big Ten schedule. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. Now they're going to reverse. Ohio State for the next 6 years, I think, is going to have to go to Wisconsin. So I wonder how that's going to change some of these regular season records for them. Because that was Ryan Day's first Big Ten loss. Like, he hadn't lost a game in the Big Ten, which is absurd. But I know there was a COVID year in there where they didn't play as much, and they almost lost to Indiana last year. They didn't play Michigan. Who knows how that game would have went? So he's 1-1. People keep bringing up, well, Michigan's 1-8 or whatever against Ohio State. Like, no, they're 1-1 against Ryan Day. You got to look at the current coaching matchups. Urban Meyer's not coming back to coach. I mean, if he did, I'd be kind of shocked. He said he's not. Did you see his statement come out? He's been mentioned in every college coaching job that opens, including Notre Dame now. And he said, like, no, he's focused on the NFL. He's too old. He doesn't want to go back to the college thing. He's not up to date on like the NILs type stuff. He just wants to focus on coaching football or whatever. So,
which means he's almost better prepared because he sees how to pay players better. So it'd be perfect for NILs.
Which maybe. I mean, we'll see. But I honestly think those are the keys to the rivalry going forward. And like you said, all it takes is Michigan wins, starts to win the game, and it flips college football. I think going forward right now, because we can kind of talk about the college football playoff, Michigan's number 2 right now. They have to beat Iowa. You lose to Iowa, you take the momentum out of it, and the Ohio State win doesn't mean anything, and then you're back to square one. I think if you beat Iowa and you make the playoffs, you have a chance right now. Everyone's calling it a down year. I don't see how it's a down year. Like, Ohio State wasn't down. They had the number 1 offense. Everyone was talking them up. They were like 8.5-point favorites. They just didn't expect them to lose. So I think you had multiple teams lose games that people didn't expect. Bama might be down, but again, we don't know. So right now, if Bama wins, you get 2 SEC teams in. Right? I mean, if Michigan State didn't lose to Purdue, would we have seen 2 Big Ten teams get in?
But was that an official that Michigan's 2, or are they going to re-release that tonight?
No, that's the updated one. They're 2. So it's I do have it up.
Because
it's Georgia 1, Michigan's 2, Bama's 3rd, Cincy's 4. So let's say Michigan wins in this scenario. If Alabama wins, I think Alabama's 1, Michigan's 2, Georgia's 3, or do you think they fall to 4? Like, I think they're just going to flip them, right?
What I would like to see is if they push Georgia or Alabama 1, I want the loser to go to 4, so that if they're going to make if they're going to make that rematch happen, don't play it with the SEC championship on the line, but to have a replay of the SEC national championship, put them 1-2 or 1-3.
Well, see, I was thinking too, if Georgia wins, they had a scenario where they could set up Notre Dame, Michigan for 2 and 3. Even if Cincinnati wins, just kind of jump Notre Dame in there. Or hell, even if Cincinnati loses, like, I think they could have really set that up just for a ratings game. Because, like, if you really want to draw ratings, you sneak Notre Dame in there. But with Brian Kelly leaving, I don't think that happens now. Because, like, let's say, even like in a crazier scenario, if, like, to you, what if Cincinnati loses, Oklahoma State loses, and then Alabama beats Georgia? They could really just shift everything around and say, like, oh, we'll put Notre Dame at 4, Michigan at 1, and then Georgia and Bama at 2-3. Then you're having 2 rivalry games for the actual semifinals. I think those would be the biggest ratings I've ever had. Right?
Yeah.
So they could kind of just make up the numbers as they had them fit, if that fell into their lap. But Cincinnati's been playing tight. I'm just wondering, if they win, do they keep them at 4? I don't think they drop out, but do they bump them up to 3? Because I could see them saying, like, Georgia goes undefeated, we don't want Michigan to play Cincinnati, you know, if they perceive them as the easier team. I think they'll set Cincinnati and Georgia up for that Sugar Bowl. Was it Sugar Bowl last year? Georgia beat them by a field goal. I think they'll want that rematch as round 1 if Georgia wins. I mean, if Georgia doesn't win, then you're back to the same old shit, like with the playoffs and everyone's complaints about it. Like, you have potentially all the other 3 power conferences left out. Hell, that's why if Michigan loses and Georgia wins, does Michigan still make the playoffs at that point? Like, if some of these other teams lose? Like, I don't think they would put an Ohio State team in that just got pounded, because I think the committee would be like, yeah, we don't want to see that happen against Georgia's defense. Like, they couldn't even score on Michigan's defense. How the hell are they going to score on Georgia's defense? That'll be an Ohio State blowout special. And then do they put Notre Dame in without a coach? Like at that point, I think that'd be like, yeah, we'll just put Michigan back in. Because like if chaos really happens, but I think this is going to be. We haven't seen any conference championship game like upsets yet, ever, right? Not that I remember. I think it's always worked out kind of perfectly, where everything falls into line. But there's not another conference like Oregon's at 10. So if Oregon wins the conference, they're not right there anymore to kind of jump in if one of the other conferences slip up. Like you're waiting, Notre Dame's that team. Brian Kelly's leaving, which is my big topic for the week. Like he's going to LSU. What does the committee do with that? Right? If you're them, and let's say there's an upset, who cares who it is? Do you put them in the playoffs, or do you go with a team that lost, or potentially like just keep them in, or like maybe, I don't even know, do you jump in with like Ole Miss or Ohio State or something?
Well, I think what you have to do is you just have to look in general at like let these championship games play out, and then go from there, because there's too many what if scenarios that you can almost bog yourself down. So I think you got to let the championships play out first, and then barring absolute chaos where multiple teams that are in that top bracket are coming out all right, that are expected to win. But this is clearly one of those times where Michigan will just come out smelling like a rose because they'll play Cincinnati in the national championship.
We always finish second, Matt. Do you know that? Second in basketball, baseball, softball.
Because see, this is exactly the scenario. You'll play the team without a pulse. You'll play Cincinnati, and then you'll just throttle. You'll either throttle them or you'll get blown out. It'll be a boom or bust.
Well, that's why in my dream scenario, Georgia wins, and they play Cincinnati in the 4 spot. Oklahoma State jumps them to play Michigan, because that gives I think Harbaugh would do well against the passing offense. They have an NFL D coordinator, which Ryan Day kept saying like, well, he's an NFL guy. Did you see his NFL schemes? Like did that confuse you, bro? Like, why are you bringing that up? And then I think that would be a game where Michigan has more talent than Oklahoma State. They can win that one, and then like Cincinnati upsets Georgia, they blow their wad in that game. And then like you say, that's a national championship, one to remember. Where Ohio State fans are like holding up signs that say asterisks next time we have game day. Like, but you could be right. I just wonder, like, what would happen in that scenario? Like, what if all these teams lose? Let's say like Georgia wins, but the other teams lose up there. Would they jump like in Iowa all the way up? They would be 11-2. They'd have the same record as like Michigan. Do you just be like, I know you just lost, but we're just going to keep Michigan there because we already had them at 2. Like they'll fall to 4, and like Notre Dame will be in, because I think that gives them a lot of other cards to play with. These teams that are in the playoffs, like even Bama with 2 losses, then they would be there, I would imagine. Like Alabama right now, if Michigan lose, like let's say if Michigan and Alabama both lose for that 4 spot, Michigan would have the better losses. They would also have the better wins. Like they'd have the top 10 Ohio State win. Alabama doesn't have like, who's their win? Their loss is what? A&M, which they conveniently kept ranked at 25, Matt. Just in case Alabama loses. But like if you're looking head to head, I don't see like if they both lose how you would have Michigan fall further than Alabama. Other than you're like, oh well, they lost to Georgia that time. But Michigan's both losses then would be against top 10 teams, because Iowa would jump. Or I guess Michigan State's at 11 right now.
Well, you look at the teams that Alabama has struggled with in the past. It's been the Gus Malzahn style spread teams that Fickell's offense is kind of geared similar to. So it's not outside of the realm to imagine that he's going to that if Alabama played Cincinnati, that Cincinnati wouldn't have at least a fighting chance of making waves.
See, I think that would be a disaster for Michigan because I think Georgia's the best team. So if Alabama beats Georgia, Michigan plays Georgia the 2-3 game, and then Cincinnati-Bama is the other game. I think you would. I think there's a good chance you'd see an SEC championship game again.
But I think Georgia's that team that they're blowing everyone out right now, but they're due to have that giant letdown game.
Well, that's so if Georgia wins, Cincinnati and Oklahoma State win, and those four are the four playoff teams, Michigan's the most recent national champ, Matt. 24 years. None of those other teams, like you would actually have a fresh playoff where you would have a new champ for the first time in 2 decades. And I think that's something the playoff committee, I think, would be drooling at right now. Like, I honestly think that they're begging or hoping that Georgia wins. I don't think they really want 2 SEC teams in because I think they see the ratings dripping each year, and they're kind of happy the Michigan win because now, like, look at the ratings of that. Everyone's talking about it. It was mentioned on every NFL game that I watched. And normally I've told you, like, they've been negative towards Harbaugh. Every NFL, and you know that they get the talking orders from, like, the headquarters. So they're all like, yeah, we're really happy for Jim Harbaugh, blah, 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 blah. Like, that has to be good for recruiting. And I think that
they're happy for him because they knew he was going to get his ass fired if he lost again. And then they're going to have to try to struggle to justify him going to the Jets and getting fired after 3 seasons.
Hey, Matt, the guy wins. I think I saw a stat where
that's what they say about Tomlin. Sell me some bridges somewhere else.
Well, first off, Michigan, if they make the playoffs, Harbaugh is always lights out at the beginning of the season. So maybe it doesn't matter who they play.
So do you think they should just have the playoff at the start of the year where he's playing his best?
No, I'm saying he has, like, time to scheme. And he's not going to have players like sitting out, you know, or like Jabril Peppers getting injured in warmups, you know. But maybe the team will be fired up and he'll have like all kind of tricks up his sleeve to lead like a massive blowout. Who knows? Because like he's been in those in the NFL. I mean, even his NFL record, like his early playoff record, there weren't so many NFC Championship games because he was just beating teams they weren't supposed to beat. The Saints, how many years in a row? Like the Saints guys, did you know that there's a channel like a Saints guy runs where he just hates on Harbaugh? It's like, I stumbled across it and I'm like, who is this guy? Why does he hate him? And then it clicked. Oh my God, they've kept beating the Saints. This guy probably hates him back from like the NFL days. And now he's just like secretly hating him. All of his stuff was LSU and New Orleans Saints stuff. So it's like, why would a random LSU guy just hate Jim Harbaugh? But then I'm like, oh, he ruined the Drew Brees stuff. Running Colin Kaepernick all over him. I think the Alex Smith quarterback bootleg was against the Saints, where it's like Alex Smith just bootlegged down the sideline and beat you guys. Embarrassing. So there are people out there that just hate him for that reason, and now we'll see how it goes. Like in terms of Cincinnati being there, I wonder too, and this goes into the coaching carousel stuff. Do you think there's a chance that Luke Fickell just leaves for Notre Dame before the playoffs?
I'm not going to say never, but this is if he's not happy at Cincinnati or Cincinnati's not willing to pay him, there's his golden parachute to jump out.
Brian Kelly had 1 week, Matt. Forget about the early signing day with LSU stuff, recruiting wise. He had to wait 1 week to see if his team backed into the playoffs. Because if you get Cincinnati losing and Oklahoma State losing, Notre Dame's in.
But I think he had to have seen over the last couple of seasons, like he's had as good of a team as he could put together at Notre Dame, and he couldn't get over the hump.
Even this year, he's not going to say like, "Hey, I'm going to give it one more go in the playoffs, LSU, and if you want me, I'll be there after the playoff loss." You know, like let me go out on my own terms if you want me this bad. Where he's like, nope, even if we get in, we're dead. Like, our team is so bad, we'll get slaughtered by any of these teams that I'm just going to give up now. That's what that felt like to me.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure with LSU, for as crazy as their fan base is, they were like, if you're going to take this job, you're going to take this job right now so that we can announce it
Well, did you hear?
And
So let's get into the coaching. Oh, I guess I'm already on it, kind of. So the rumors were that they were ready to announce Lincoln Riley.
yes,
And so they had like the caterer set up because we had that. Wasn't there another coaching change where we had said that there was caterers ordered and stuff that they canceled? And then I forget who that was. But it happened again where they had the caterer set up and they had to cancel it. And the event never happened. And then he went to USC. Now I'm seeing rumors of on their bye week before they lost to Baylor earlier in the year, he was out in LA interviewing for the USC job. Like they've confirmed it that he was there on the bye week. Which is kind of like crazy to me. Like and apparently he kind of let it be known that right after they made the SEC decision that he was not a fan and he did not want to follow Oklahoma to the SEC. Which,
I mean, rightfully so. I think he probably politicked the right way, and they're just like, no, we're like, if this is the way that it played out, where they said, because I'm sure they talked with him about like, hey, what do you think of going to the SEC? And if he's like, that's a terrible idea for us because if we get slammed into the SEC West, then we're going to end up running into a couple buzzsaws every year that you end up being Tennessee or Vanderbilt, where the best that you finish is third place. So it's like, why would you do that to yourself? And they're like, I don't care what you say. We're going to go anyhow because it means more in the SEC.
But to be fair, if they rebalance the divisions, they shouldn't hit that buzzsaw. The buzzsaw being Alabama. Alabama should be moved to the east with Georgia to kind of rebalance them. And the west should have Oklahoma, LSU, A&M, Mizzou,
but they're not
Arkansas.
They're not going to do anything to upset the cash cow.
Yeah, so what are they going to do? Put Oklahoma in the east? I mean, they moved Mizzou there. How many other teams can you put to the east? Arkansas? And then why would you even put Oklahoma and Texas into the West? Because that would have to piss off Nick Saban. Like,
or maybe he would like playing that.
He probably looks at the East and says, like, oh, I could rip through that. And to be fair, if with the way Georgia's recruiting right now, if they move Bama to the East, you have a chance to just go ahead and have both teams in the playoffs. Hell, Michigan and Ohio State, if they continue on this trajectory where both teams are head and shoulders above everyone, both teams are going to be in the playoffs, I mean, more rather than not. I mean, even this year, if Ohio State doesn't lose to Oregon, they're right there. They're ahead of Notre Dame. They're ahead of probably Oklahoma State. So any team that falters, you would have both of them in. It just so happens that it was like a weird reversal, and we were that Purdue loss over to Michigan State. Michigan State loses to Purdue. If they don't, they're in the Big Ten championship. Michigan's sitting there at 11-1, ranked in the playoffs already, without even having to play in the championship game. They'd probably be 4 right now. Michigan State would be what? I mean, they'd probably fall a little bit because of the Ohio State blowout, but they would be up there. They're not going to be behind a 2-loss team. And then you'd be sitting right there. I think that would be the same exact thing where Alabama and Georgia right now in the playoffs, let's say Alabama's loss was to Georgia, and Georgia's playing, who knows who, Oklahoma this weekend then instead. Alabama's sitting at third. They don't even have to play. They're in the playoff. That's why I think you see these conferences wanting to expand. And that's why I like Lincoln Riley going out west. Does he have any contacts out there? He's never been out there. He was at East Carolina, right?
Yeah. But I almost think that with the way that he was running his offense, if he gets a decent defensive coordinator, he could really do well at USC. I think like that's the splashy kind of move that they needed to make in order to pick that recruiting up. And for him, it's 1,000 times better than what he was going into moving Oklahoma into the SEC. So now you go out to the Pac-12 where Oregon's the primary competition, and if you can beat them, you have a shot at running the table and making the playoffs. Like you have an easier route going the way he did.
And well, they're in the South. They would have to face each other. Like, it would most likely be them or Utah in the South, right? As it's been lately. I don't know. I would assume it's Utah. I'm going to look up the Pac-12 championship games here. Go ahead.
Well, and I also think that when you're looking at, like, Southern Cal, you have to be able to recruit, like, just geographically a stronger area. I mean, I think you'd have the competition with Chip Kelly just because of Chip Kelly's, like, known for his schemes. But I think you have a geographic advantage of being located there in the nicer area of Southern Cal and being able to pull a lot of those recruits that are getting pulled back to the East Coast programs.
Yeah, so looking back, it's been Utah. Utah's actually been as high as 5 in 2019, which I don't remember. So if they would have won, they probably would have been in the playoffs. They lost to Oregon.
Yeah, they lost late in the year.
Yeah, to Oregon in the championship game. So they would have been in. I don't even remember a team doing that, like being close to the playoffs and then losing that championship week. But USC's been there. So it's really been Utah or USC in the East in the past 5 years, or the South, I mean. And then the North was Oregon or Washington, which Washington's going through their own coaching change. Apparently they threw the truck at Matt Campbell, and he said no. So now I'm wondering, what if Notre Dame goes after him? Because, like, he's been recruiting well and having consistent success at Iowa State. I know Notre Dame's a different beast. Out of those two, Matt Campbell or Luke Fickell, who would you go for?
I guess I would go with Fickell just because he showed that he was able to take over. Now, I'm going to switch. I'm going to reverse myself here and go with Campbell just because with what he started with Iowa State and what he's able to build them into, I think that's more – he's stepping into a better situation as far as the overall talent that I think he would be able to be more successful, where Fickell has shown – he's able to fill in. He's able to step right in for something Brian Kelly already started and win with. So I mean, he could also be equally talented. But I think a fresh face is what's needed there.
Remember, Iowa State had Chiswick coins to celebrate their wins at Iowa State, and he went to Auburn and won a national championship.
They did have Chiswick coins,
so maybe they will have a chance at a national championship going right to Notre Dame. I mean, they're almost in the playoffs. That's where, like, to me, it's baffling. You're going to go to LSU. They made the playoffs once and had a national championship that one time. But I know that's kind of like, I like
Les Miles did it.
Was that playoffs? That was pre-playoffs. That was the BCS bullshit where they just kind of got in, remember? That was the controversy that started the playoffs. Because they matched up LSU and Alabama again when it should have been Stanford or one of those other teams.
It didn't mean as much, though, to them.
Wasn't that the McCaffrey year where he ran wild over Iowa in the Rose Bowl? That could have been an earlier year. I don't remember. Plus, I hate McCaffrey.
We don't remember those insignificant people playing. It just meant more
McCaffrey,
than LSU.
Him and playing in the same statement, I'm baffled. Usually on the sideline. So, I mean... That's it. That's the big thing. Franklin signed up. So I after the game went out. They had like a lantern festival in the area. So I went to that and I wore my Michigan stuff. So many people were like just congratulating me on the win. It was unbelievable. Like, a lot of people hate Ohio State, but a lot of them were Penn State fans, and they all hate the James Franklin deal. And I was wondering, like, does anyone? I don't know anyone outside of State College that likes James Franklin. Like, it clicked to me. Like, oh my gosh. Everyone down here, like the other Penn State fans that aren't in that area, they hate the guy. They think, like, what an extreme waste of money. Then they go losing to Michigan State that has players out with illness, Matt. They weren't even at full strength. And they're losing. And then they had paid an absurd amount for their coach. that has had one winning year, Matt, this year. So, I mean, he's going to be hitting that transfer portal hard again. Can you get that success if Michigan makes the playoffs? How do you recruit against two teams in your division that have been in the playoffs? I know Michigan State used to be in the playoffs when they had D'Antonio. But like I said, throw out the old coaches' records. I think you have to look at the current coaches because it's a different scenario. Like, Tucker's way different than D'Antonio. That's why, like, Ohio State fans keep talking about Urban Meyer this and Urban Meyer that. He's not there. Like, talking about Jim Tressel, he's not there. They had a scandal. How come you don't bring up Luke Fickell? That's the one thing where you talk about Luke Fickell. He did coach at Ohio State for a year. I think they had a losing record and they lost to Michigan. So that's the one thing where I think if you're one of these bigger schools, you're kind of like, oh, yeah, remember that year? Maybe they hold that grudge because Ohio State does. Like, I guarantee, like, they didn't even consider him when they were doing, like, the Ryan Day. They said, we saw what happened last time. We're just going to try to keep this Urban Meyer train going. So, the other one, Penn State's defensive coordinator, speaking of them, Pry, he got hired by Virginia Tech. So I didn't know that he was a graduate assistant there in like the 90s with Beamer. But he wants to bring that culture back. I just don't know how that hire is going to be. I didn't realize he was there with James Franklin all those years because there were a couple bad blowouts that Penn State faced. Like, I know Michigan scored 40 points on them a few times. And, like, looking back, like, those weren't really the best Michigan teams either. So, like...
Well, he'll be at Virginia Tech, and he'll have Bud Foster as, like, an analyst there. Or, like, he does something with the university that he can go to one of the best defensive gurus.
Maybe. But we'll see. The name, to me, didn't click. I don't know how much recruiting he does for Penn State, but it's not a name that I remember seeing, like, as one of their top recruiters. So it's an interesting hire. CBS has it as a C+ already. Of course, we talked about Brian Kelly going to Notre Dame, or leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU.
But honestly, though, that's a harsh grade for Virginia Tech because realistically, who are they getting?
They had hired an up-and-comer. Probably has no head coaching experience, Matt.
Well, exactly. And it's not like a program. It's not like Brian Kelly's going, Virginia Tech, that's where I'm going to win.
To be honest, anyone looking at that division,
like Ogeron isn't looking to win there. And I thought they were Virginia Tech's on the Atlantic side, I believe.
Are they? I thought they were in the coastal with the other has-beens.
No.
I'm going to look this up because that's even worse if they are. Like, how unbalanced are those divisions then? You're the ACC guy. I every week I throw out an incorrect ACC fact, but this week I am right. They're in the coastal with Pitt, Miami,
Syracuse, Duke.
No, Syracuse is in the Atlantic.
Oh, so
them in Boston College. If they flipped the two North Carolina schools, like if they took North Carolina and Duke out and flipped them with Syracuse and Boston College, you would pretty much have a Big East division with just Georgia Tech in there for some reason. I guess Louisville. Flip Louisville, too, have a Big East versus ACC division. That's what they should do. I mean, they kind of already have it. I don't know why they did that. Probably to separate North Carolina from NC State. But did you see the end of that game? Unreal. NC State kicks an onside kick. They have no chance of even coming back. They kick an onside kick. The North Carolina guy runs up like he's going to catch the ball. Instead, he just runs by it, and it just like falls, and then the ball just lands like on the 10-yard line, or not the 10-yard line, but it goes 10 yards, lands on the line, and the NC State guy falls on it for the easiest onside kick recovery I've ever seen. I'm like, you're running right past the ball. What are you doing? It was a slow roller. It was like one of those ones where he taps it. You know, like Florida State tried, like just trying to tap the ball, except he biffed and didn't hit it at all. Which I'm surprised he didn't realize he missed and swung his other leg around and tried to kick it.
Well, I mean, in hindsight, don't be in that situation and just outright win like they should have.
Well, that's what NC State did. They got the outside kick. They went down and won. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have it. The Pitt versus NC State ACC championship game. Maybe I'll go. But Wouldn't have won anyway because Michigan's playing in the championship game. I didn't think that was a possibility. Now we're here. Almost had chaos. Because the true chaos would have been somehow Wake losing and Clemson getting in. Like if NC State would have lost to North Carolina, Wake would have 100% lost, so that Clemson could have been in the ACC championship game. Just to get that back out. But I'm telling you, the ACC is wide open. I don't care what they say about Virginia Tech. Throw a bunch of money around, then you'll get a name. Like TCU hired Sonny Dykes, and then there were talk that maybe Oklahoma's interested in him. So could you imagine if he pulls what was that guy from Pitt that was hired for like a day, and then he's like, going to Arizona State.
Fraud Graham. He's at Hawaii now.
Yeah, what a waste. Not even a good coach. Pitt's way better than what he's doing.
I thought you were talking about Mike Hayward. He was there for he was the one that was there for a day. At least Graham was stuck around for a season.
Oh, was he? Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, Mike Hayward was only there for a couple of days, and then there was like some domestic abuse things that
as I say, he
had to resign.
Yeah, so Jimmy Lake was fired at Washington. They bring in Kellen DeBoer, if that's how you say his name, from Fresno State. He had some big wins, but we'll see how that happens. He used to be a coach in the Big Ten. Was he a Michigan guy? I don't even know who this guy is. Try to see where he coached before.
You had to look that up too earlier, just because I saw the name. Was like,
oh, he was at Indiana. He was their offensive coordinator in 2019.
So was Lake in the same boat as Rolovich, where he just wasn't going to comply with the vaccine mandate?
Oh no, he hit a player or something.
Oh, that's right. They
had like the player issue or whatever, and then
that's right. You
threw one in the locker room or something. We talked about it when it broke, but I don't remember all the details. And then he had to step down, like he was out of game. And then they kept losing, and then he was just gone. Florida hiring Napier from Louisiana. I'm not sure how that's going to go. They said his recruiting prowess. Dude, he's at Louisiana. You don't know how he's going to recruit at a big school. What are you talking about?
I thought that was and not just because they're a rival, but I thought that was kind of a belly flop of a hire, because when you have Les Miles, or when you have Brian Kelly getting moved around and Lincoln Riley moved around, and like people were making these splash hires, and they're like, we hired the best of what was left early.
Well, they said that was their guy the whole time, and it's like, the guy we'd never heard of? Like, I mean, he was 39-12 with Louisiana. Like, that's like what Harbaugh's record is, but he's at Michigan. Like, you're not playing the same level of teams, you know? Not a knock on the guy, but, like, come on. Jerry Kill's back, though. Which, wasn't he out from seizures?
Yeah.
Minnesota, now he's back.
I had one of my good friends is a Minnesota guy, and he said like his assistant coaches just kind of knew like what a seizure situation was, so he'd like fall out with seizures, they'd just be like stepping over him, making calls.
I know, I've seen it, and it's crazy. So now it's like he's back, and Minnesota, thankfully, they beat Wisconsin, because otherwise Michigan would have had to play Wisconsin again, and always playing the same team. I know they ran over him in Madison, but playing the same team twice is always tough. I would have rather had him play Iowa, because there's not the revenge factor, you know?
It's a bold statement, wanting to play Iowa.
Why?
Because you never know which Iowa team you're going to face.
Hey, I always liked
that
Iowa.
tough one, and then you'd be crying that you have to go to the Compass Bowl instead of the national championship playoffs.
You don't know. Maybe Iowa will get invited. I'd cheer for them in the playoffs. You never know. This could be a chaos year. They could also. I wonder if Iowa keeps it close, maybe they'll get the Rose Bowl bid, even if they do lose over Ohio State, because that would be a win for me too. Let Ryan Day coaching the Citrus Bowl. He said he was going to score 100, Matt, on Michigan. He didn't barely score.
He didn't score 100, so that was a win.
Yeah, that was what the thing was. He's like, I'm going to score 100 on you. Because Harbaugh said that he had analysts coaching on the field and he wasn't supposed to. And he was like, hey, I'm not going to say yes or no to that. I'm just going to say I'm going to hang 100 on you. And people were like, classy move by him. Classy. Clay Helton somehow got a job. He said, where even is this school? Georgia Southern? So
that was the option school.
That's going to be awful for them. We talked about Jim Mora before going to UConn. Don Brown going to UMass, which now you're looking at it. So Michigan had a defense with a lot of talent the past couple of years. And I'm seeing how you play a little bit of bend but don't break, and then you give Hutchinson just a little bit more time to get to the quarterback. What about these other defensive linemen like Uche that are having success in the NFL? How much better would they have been if Don Brown, just played a little bit of prevent every once in a while? I wonder, would Michigan have turned the corner a little bit earlier? Would Don Brown not be floating around? So
then he wouldn't be Don Brown. He's got to be aggressive.
Even sometimes how about you go for the win, Matt? And then Texas Tech hired Joey McGuire, which we talked about, a guy I never heard of. But they were like, yeah, he's Baylor's guy. Baylor's coach, he was supposed to be picked up, but then he signed an extension. Scott Frost also extended, or I guess retained, they're calling it. But remember, Harbaugh signed that deal. Harbaugh took a pay cut. Whatever he took in pay cut, he was going to get as a bonus. Now he's donating that bonus money to coaches on Michigan staff and staff that had to take pay cuts because of COVID. Classy move. So now all those people that were saying how Harbaugh's a big asshole, it's like, why? Like, there's really no proof of him being an asshole other than you just not liking the guy for whatever reason it is. So he's doing his part to really shift the narrative.
He's just doing it just so they don't fire him. Like, look, I'm giving all this money back to the university. Like, what else do you want me to do?
Well, it was going to be, so it's $500,000 for beating Ohio State, I think, or maybe it was winning the Big Ten East, which is basically beating Ohio State. Then he gets another. If he wins the Big Ten, I think he gets another. Or that was $500,000. I mean, for doing that, he gets another $1 million if he wins the Big Ten. And then he gets another $500,000 for making the playoffs, which if he wins the Big Ten, he's getting both. So that's at least $2 million. Then someone had said, like, if there's certain other records, like win totals, it could be up to like $3 point something million he's donating back, which is absurd. Could you imagine? I mean, his wife was supposedly in on it, but could you imagine if you're like going home to your wife, you're like, "Hey, I made a decision today."
But it's not like he's. I mean, for perspective, he's been an NFL coach. He's had his paydays. He was an NFL player.
Yeah, he was a player.
I mean, so it's not like he's eating ketchup bread at home. Been like, hey, hon.
I know what an asshole Coach O sounds like. What did he say? He could afford a double cheeseburger or double meat burger, whatever the hell he called it. Like, what the hell are you doing, dude? People are losing their jobs still, and he's like making jokes about how I can get 2 meat slice patties on my burger. Then he wonders why Florida didn't hire him, which would have been funny if Florida would have just hired Coach O and been like, yeah, we just don't care. Because like if Miami hires him, that's even funnier, because I think one of Miami's issues is they don't have the hype. Coach O would bring the hype. I mean, if they can't get Lane Kiffin, of course. I want Lane Kiffin, maybe Coach O at Miami.
One of the names that I heard at Oklahoma that I think would really throw a wrench in the SEC is if he was willing to come out of whatever hole he's in, bring Paul Johnson out and bring the triple option back to Oklahoma.
I thought you were going to say Mark Stoops.
No, not Mark Stoops.
Bob Stoops has to be pissed that Lincoln Riley just tore everything he built down. And I guess you didn't watch the game. So at the end of the game, Fox was like talking to Bob Stoops, just talked about how Harbaugh was so awesome of a coach and like how he would love to just go out to dinner with him after the game. I'm like, what are you talking about? But the way he said it, it was like he was genuine. Like he really wanted to just go hang out with Harbaugh after the game. And I'm like, this guy misses coaching. So like maybe he would just come back to Oklahoma. And
well, he's going to be like Alvarez right now. And he's just going to coach him. He's going to just keep letting guys go so that he can coach in the bowl game.
Well, he is a part of their thing. But I wonder, like, if he did come back and, like, he wins the SEC and then wins the national championship before Lincoln Riley does, how would that twist the narrative? That would be hilarious. Because, like, think about it. I know Oklahoma, they're going to get a recruiting bump from going to the SEC. Texas A&M did. Texas A&M hasn't exactly struggled in the SEC. You move Alabama to the other division, and then it's even easier. Like you're beating up on your old buddies, Mizzou, Texas A&M, and Arkansas, and then you're just adding LSU in there, along with the 2 Mississippi schools. Like I know Lane Kiffin won't be there long. Maybe Mike Leach will get it rolling, but I honestly think that's a decent setup for getting the pass of a quality loss. You know how the SEC does that, where they're like a couple quality losses, and then instead of playing a bazillion Big 12 games, conference games, and then replaying teams, you have a crossover, and then you have Tulsa and whatever other school you want to do, Northern Illinois, and you're like, shit, this is much easier. They had it right all along. Bob Stoops will come in. He'll be like, kind of like the Urban Meyer treatment, where everyone loves him because he was on TV for so long. They're like, there's our guy, Bob Stoops. Wait, did you see that shot of him eating the hamburgers with Harbaugh after the game? They're like, oh yeah, what a bunch of great guys.
The meat patties.
Double meat patties, man. They can afford them. Harbaugh donated his salary though, so maybe he can. I don't know.
Maybe he can't.
Coach Joe would know. He was making a ton of money.
He can only get single meat patties because he's not a multinational championship winning coach.
But I mean, it's just, I think this is crazy, the craziest timeline. But speaking of national championships, my final bell is going to be on the salary donation. But the one thing that a lot of Ohio State fans, I don't think, realize, for as successful as Ohio State's been, they've only won 2 national championships in my lifetime, Matt. Michigan has 1. So I know they're beating the crap out of Michigan, but you're only up in natties by 1. If, like you say, if the stars align and Michigan gets 1 this year, with their current coach, with Ohio State's current coach having 0, I would say that they're going to be in complete chaos. I would think that they would be in meltdown beyond belief, because how would Harbaugh, as bad as a coach as they say he is, have the same amount of natties as legendary Ohio State coaches Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel at Ohio State? I mean, I'm sure that they'd probably be rolling in Urban's Florida natties, but in terms of current coaches, the Big Ten hasn't had any win the national championship. I mean, even Penn State hasn't been there forever. That's why I thought that their fans should have been pushing harder when they won the Big Ten and were left out and let Ohio State go and get killed. Like, that was all bullshit. And so maybe, as long as Michigan, you got to win, though. If you get the playoffs and you have an easier matchup, you can't get blown out. You don't have to win that game, but you can't get blown out. Because I think then recruits see that and they're like, oh, you just don't have the talent. If you win a game, get to the national championship, and then Georgia blows you out, not a big deal. I mean, that happens all the time, but get there. Prove you belong. But we'll see. Anything else you have for anything?
Yeah, just going into this off season, I was disappointed that Florida State didn't win their rivalry game. So we had the highest of highs with Michigan winning and the lowest of lows with losing to the Gators.
Well, okay. I have a question for you though, because a lot of people they talk about like, oh, they need the bowl game. You still get to practice even if you don't have the bowl game. The only thing you lose is a little bit of extra practices, which isn't that much anymore. I saw another coach talk about it, where it's really not that much of a difference. You can still practice now throughout the time period. I guess the NCAA made some adjustments for competitive reasons, but you do lose the playing time for some of your guys. So, like, does it really make a difference for where Florida State is right now?
No, and I mean, I guess the nicer side to it is that, considering that we had the COVID year last year for Norvell, and this is really counting as the true year 1, because he had the full spring, he had the full opportunity to implement everything. I like to see the progress, because from starting 0-4 to being a game away from making a bowl, you saw the progress. And I think the only thing that's going to change is going into the offseason. If they can solidify this early round of recruiting and pull and keep some of the talent that they have coming in, I think that's going to be huge for them, and not losing people to the portal. So overall, I was satisfied with the progress over the course of the year, knowing that they were still a year or two away from getting the roster in a position to be more competitive. Obviously, I want it to be where we're back to just kicking everyone's teeth in, but for as much damage as was done from the transition from Jimbo to Taggart to Norvell, it's going to take time.
Well, that's the one thing where in the ACC, when we talk about it, it's like a forgotten conference right now, kind of like the Pac-12. For whatever reason, they keep throwing Oregon up there, because if Clemson had the same record as Oregon, or they were like a Wake Forest record or something, they would be up there too. But just the name recognition, they're just kind of like they're begging for either Miami or Florida State to really pull through. So we'll see how it builds. Florida State's in the worst division for rebuilding, as you saw with Michigan. You got to get over that Clemson hump, and now you have Wake Forest jumping up, which is kind of like how Michigan State jumped up in Michigan's way, and then Penn State was there for a while when Harbaugh got there. Too many different teams. If they were in the Coastal, that's why I'm shocked like Miami just can't jump in. Although I guess they're kind of like a Nebraska scenario. Nebraska's there. They went 1-8, and in those Big Ten games, there was a 0-point differential. Like the one game they won was by such a high score that it equaled out the points against them in their losses. Like how hard would that even be to do? And at one point, they were winning. Like in that game, or they were losing by they would have had a positive point differential because they blowed out one of the teams. They just killed them. And then all the other games were close. Like they were down 6 against Ohio State at the end of the game. They were driving, and I think it was tied against Michigan when they fumbled the ball. I guess they really weren't driving. They were on their side of the field, which set up the easy game-winning field goal. But you have those where you're just at the end of the game, and it's like, why did we just fumble there and let them kick the field goal to win it? Like, how easy was that to be? And we're at home. So, some of those games were at home. Like, Scott Frost, you got to step up. How different would it have been if Nebraska beat Michigan? Then the Ohio State win leads to nothing. And it's Michigan, or it's Ohio State, I guess, in the Big Ten Championship then instead. And they're like, hey, back to where we were. And the win just goes, and Michigan plays in the Citrus Bowl or whatever the hell they're playing in. But that one...
They play Florida again.
No, they're bowl eligible, but they're not that good. Maybe we'd play South Carolina. Or I don't even know if South Carolina's bowl eligible. Who do we typically play? Hey, a lot of our schools that we play, Florida, Texas, they haven't been playing so good. So I don't know how that would go. But we'll see. I don't really have anything else. You have anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, hopefully the conference championship games go well, and we'll have an exciting show next week as we get ready for the playoffs. And maybe the Steelers will turn it around. We'll see if we have some changes, but I'm not expecting it. But if you're tired with the Steelers, go ahead and buy a Packers share and just become an owner and own the team and see what that's like. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.